Ruthie Mae McCoy was a tangible illustration of how our institutions fail the vulnerable and downtrodden. She was a black woman from the south side of Chicago who started showing signs of mental illness in her 20s. Despite the general assumption that McCoy had a mental illness, many who knew her were unable to diagnose it. All they knew was that she had a sudden, unpredictable tendency to curse or talk to herself or other people on the street. Later, she would be given the diagnosis of residual-type schizophrenia, which is given to those who have previously had schizophrenic episodes but are not currently showing symptoms. McCoy was unable to maintain a consistent employment when she was suffering from mental illness. She was never successful in keeping a job for more than a month. She spent a lot of her life in institutions, which made things much more tough. McCoy eventually ended up at Abla Homes in 1983, a public housing complex that was conveniently close to Cabrini Green, the setting for the 1992 film Candyman. Despite her situation, McCoy appeared to have taken steps to leave the projects in the months prior to her 1987 murder. McCoy had been given the go-ahead to get SSI, supplemental security income. Not only did this increase the amount of monthly aid she received, but SSI also paid back to the application date. This indicated that McCoy's first check would be close to $2,000, a considerable figure for someone experiencing poverty in the 1980s. McCoy bought some new clothes and basic household supplies, with some of the money from the check that she intended to use to assist her escape from the projects. By no means was it lavish spending, but the purchases would have attracted attention. Whoever killed McCoy might have done so because they thought she had a significant amount of money hidden away in her apartment. The Chicago PD got a call from McCoy on the evening of April 22, 1987. The dispatcher was overwhelmed by the frantic temperament of McCoy. McCoy reportedly told them that someone had thrown the cabinet to the ground and were exiting the bathroom in her apartment. The dispatcher didn't realize at the time, but as we now know, this indicated that the intruders were breaking in through the bathroom medicine cabinet. A police car was dispatched in response to the request despite the uncertainty. What happened next was a puzzling act of carelessness. Unfortunately, the dispatcher recorded McCoy's call as a disturbance rather than a break-in. Perhaps the inaccurate reporting can be used to justify the officer's lack of urgency when visiting McCoy's residence. The Chicago PD received further 911 calls from residents who claimed to have heard gunfire and shouting before the PD ever arrived. After some time, several police officers showed up at McCoy's house, but when they knocked on her door, nobody responded. The key to her apartment was waiting for them at the management office of Abla Homes, but to add to the already tragic situation, it didn't fit the lock on the door. You would expect the officers on the scene would try to get past these obstacles, given McCoy's panicked phone call and the subsequent reports from neighbors. But regardless of that, they decided to leave. The Chicago Police Department would get another call from one of McCoy's neighbors that evening. Police were informed by the neighbor that McCoy usually said hello to her twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon, but that she hadn't seen her since the previous day. The cops went back to McCoy's flat in Numbers. They pounded on McCoy's door once again. Their calls went unanswered once more. Again, they didn't check on McCoy's well-being, they just left. Neighbor Deborah Lastly, who frequently observed McCoy, was steadfast in her belief that something was wrong. She contacted the management office after realizing that the cops couldn't be of any assistance. The office sent a few personnel to McCoy's flat, and finally they were able to open the door. What they discovered was a gruesome scene. Ruthie Mae McCoy was found dead from several gunshot wounds in her bedroom. The space was in disarray as whoever the murderer was had ransacked the place. And because it had been a few days since the break-in, the decomposition was starting to kick in. Crimes committed in Chicago's public housing buildings rarely received extensive media attention, especially when the victim was a mentally ill woman of color. Detectives discovered that the killers had broken in through the medicine cabinet in the bathroom to access the house from the adjacent flat, which is the only reason the McCoy murder case made the Chicago Tribune as a news short. Although the method of admission may have astonished some individuals back then, Abla locals had a different take on events. Before McCoy's slaying, people had been breaking into apartments using medicine cabinets, according to a 1987 piece by Steve Bajir that appeared in the Chicago Reader. If Candyman hadn't come out a few years later, maybe the Ruthie Mae McCoy case would have been forgotten. In addition to sharing details with her murder, such as a setting in the Chicago projects and the infamous bathroom mirrors, the movie also featured a character with the last name McCoy. Thanks for watching. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments section down below.